Well, hey everybody, welcome to Practical Church Planting today. And on the podcast today, we're going to be talking a lot about podcasts. And in fact, we're going to give you 9 recommendations for podcasts for ministry and leadership.
Welcome back to Practical Church Planting, where in 15 minutes or less, we'll give you practical tips, advice, and encouragement to help you plant and grow healthy churches. My name is Brian Androsian. Joining me is Dylan Dodson. And today we're talking about 9 podcasts for ministry and leadership, plus a secret too.
Secret. I love secrets. A few episodes back, we did books that we thought were helpful. So that we thought we'd share some podcasts with you that you should listen to after you listen to this one, obviously.
Yes. I said a secret too. I meant dose number 2, not
secrets.
Also. One of which was this one. So he spoiled it.
Okay, well.
And the second one, we won't get into a ton because it might make someone on this podcast blush a little bit. But our dear Dylan Dodson has started the Dylan Dodson Leadership Podcast.
That has happened.
As episode, when we're recording this, how many episodes are out?
7, I think.
7 or so. You want to give a quick 5 seconds what you talk about?
Every Tuesday morning, interview different leaders, some business, some church, some artists.
Yeah.
Subscribe if you want to learn more.
Yep. It is really good. So definitely subscribe to that one.
But other than that one,
let's get into the real ones.
And other than Practical Church Planting, here are some non-affiliated podcasts.
Yes.
Number 1, and we might have mentioned this man a couple of times.
We probably have.
In the 137 million episodes we've done so far.
We've listened to him for a long time.
Is the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast. Mm-hmm. He again, he interviews a lot of ministry leaders, but also business leaders. Yep. Typically about an hour-ish long. Very good. You know, a lot of people that you've heard of, no matter what your theological or like where you are denominationally, a whole wide array of leaders, and it's always really practical, really helpful because some of that stuff's really practical. Some of the stuff that I just didn't think of, and there's always 1 or 2 nuggets from each episode that I'm like, oh, how could I apply this to my life or to New City?
Yeah.
So big fan of that. His is weekly as well. I think comes out on Tuesdays. So after you listen to mine, you can listen to this. Actually, he started doing some twice a week, and he's like, of all of these, probably the number one. I listen to absolutely every single one of his episodes.
Yeah, I appreciate that his are long form. His are, I think most are over an hour maybe, but because they don't just talk about what the person is promoting. That's the thing with a lot of podcasts is they talk about what they're promoting, which is fine.
It's like a brand new author, and let's just talk about the book the whole time.
But they talk about all kinds of different things, whether it's just what's going on in their life or different issues that are going on in the world. So I appreciate that's not always just like singular focused.
Right. So Carey Nieuwhof, he's up in Canada. If you can't spell Nieuwhof, just butcher it. You'll figure it out on Google. Yeah. His is really good. Yep. Secondly is the Craig Groeschel Leadership Podcast. Mm-hmm. Craig's are not long form, and they're not interview based. They're typically once a month, about 30 minutes. Him going through practical, bite-sized content that's also really good. And again, he's a very I don't want to say thoughtful, but he obviously leads a large organization. He's been around. He has a lot of experience. And so the stuff that he says is really good. We've listened to them as a staff team occasionally together. Yep. And his come out once a month. I think the first Wednesday of every month. And they're always fun to listen to.
Yeah. So he's the pastor of Life Church, if you're not familiar. Yep. But yeah, so his aren't, like you said, not interview based. And it's good because he's obviously, if you know anything about Life Church, you know that has to be a good leader to lead something like that. So, I mean, I can't even wrap my head around leading something like that. But it's nothing's promoted. Like I said, and this, you may get, this is something that annoys me, but nothing's promoted on it. Right. It's not him just going on when something happens, but it's just things that he's learned and things that he's taught throughout however many years he's been leading. Yep. And just reiterating those things back to you. So yeah, it's quick, easy to digest.
Right. So again, if you can't spell Groeschel, just butcher it on Google. It'll come up.
Craig G-R-O, and you'll find out the rest.
There you go. Craig Grow Podcast. Yes. Number 3 is one I found recently, although it's a few years old. It's called This Cultural Moment. Mm-hmm. It's recorded by Mark Sayers and Mark Comer. Mark Sayers is a pastor in London, I believe, or Australia, one of the two. Can't remember. And then Mark Comer is a pastor in Portland. And it's not a leadership podcast. It's about 30 minutes. I think they're on season 4 right now, or they're recording it. And they're talking about culture and philosophy and culture, and how culture has changed, and how do we address and reach and communicate in a post-Christian world, post-modern world where truth is relative. And it's just fascinating. As I'm listening, I'm like, this is so true. This is so true. This is so good. And they're about 30-minute episodes. And again, I recently stumbled upon it. Love it. It's awesome. It's called This Cultural Moment. I don't know if you've listened to it yet, but I'm a big fan of it.
I've not. So they take is it a different issue kind of every week, or?
Yeah, it's kind of, they have like 3 or 4 seasons. So it's kind of like each season, but they talk about elections. They talk about Russian interference. They talk about Japan and how, like, I mean, it's just a lot. It's called This Cultural Moment. And they're talking about cultures and how our culture is changing and how the gospel can impact people with the kind of the ideology that people have in this day and age, and why we think the way that we do, and biblically why some of that's correct, some of that's incorrect. And it's not a judgmental, like, I can't believe culture's like this. How dare they? It's just like, here's what science says. Here's what we are. Here's the downfalls of claiming to be enlightened, and basically how do you engage our culture in this moment. And I'm a big fan of it. So,
well, even I learned something from this.
There you go. This cultural moment.
You got yourself a new subscriber.
There you go. Right after this. Number 4 is one that we've both listened to, Pro Church Tools by Brady Shearer. We've talked about him in previous stuff. You know, their website, I don't know if it's prochurchtools.com, but you can Google Pro Church Tools and you'll find it. They have a lot of helpful stuff. I like his stuff. I think for us, sometimes if you're a smaller church or a church plant, some of it might be hard to implement. It might be a little bit overwhelming, but they do a lot of that stuff on social media and videos and some stuff on marketing. And so it's just really helpful. I think sometimes it's really practical. Sometimes it's like, the size that the new city is, for example, that's kind of overwhelming for me because I don't have someone that can dedicate all their time on just that. But at least gets you thinking. And their website, even past just their podcast, their website, they have a lot of good stuff on YouTube as well.
Yeah. So I think they're mainly focused towards like the creative or marketing side, which if that's not your strength and you don't have someone whose strength that is, then it's a good thing to listen to because it's something that we all have to face and is an important part of church. So yeah, they have a ton of information. They used to do a daily podcast. I think all those episodes are still available. It's just, it's like a wealth of content you could just start diving through.
Right. As of now, I think it's twice or maybe 3 times a week.
Yeah, I think it's twice a week now.
But yeah, Pro Church Tools, they offer a lot of good stuff, a lot of insight. It's very similar to our format. People talking. 5th is the Bible Project. Now, this one isn't necessarily about leadership. I mean, it's not even necessarily about ministry. It's more theology in the Bible. But I love it. I forget the guys' names.
I don't remember either, to be honest.
But anyway, they're also from Portland. And their stuff is gold. I mean, even on YouTube, you can type Bible Project. They have like theme videos. They have stuff on each book of the Bible. And their podcast is great. Normally about 45 minutes to an hour, especially if you feel like you don't have necessarily like a Bible degree or you want to learn more, but you don't want to read a big book. They take really complex concepts and like make them bite-sized and understandable. I listen to them all the time. Theirs is weekly most of the time. I think sometimes they take some break, but they've got tons of episodes if you've never heard of them that you could listen to for hours. But they break down Bible books, Bible concepts, biblical characters, and a way, I mean, the spiritual gifts, angels, demons, everything. Just a really big project, and it's free, which is absolutely incredible. Yeah,
one thing I like about them is there's a lot of different resources that want to take theology and kind of make it accessible to everybody, which is good. And like for myself, I didn't go to seminary, so I like stuff like this, but a lot of them make it so dumbed down that it's kind of like they're talking down to you. And so this, I love the Bible Project because it is. They speak in a way that anyone can understand. That you don't have to have a seminary degree to understand what they're saying. But they're not dumbing it down so far to where it's like elementary level. Like it's still concepts that never would have even crossed my mind, and all these things that are. It's just like it's genius, but in a way that I understand what they're saying.
You'll learn something significant from it,
and like regardless of your education or experience level, I feel
and so it's a good one. The Bible Project, look it up. I'll watch a lot of their stuff. And what's interesting too, last thing on them is that you can't really tell where they are. I don't want to say where they are theologically, but like where they hold certain positions. Like what, like they don't. I mean, I guess if it's in the text or whatever they're talking about, but it's very like it's not it's not like a certain denomination or theological bent will like this more than others. It's just like, here's what Scripture says, here's what this means, here's the history. Of course, I'm sure they have their positions, but like you'd have to really listen to it. You wouldn't be like, oh, I don't agree with them, I don't agree with that. It's just really good what they do.
That's a good point.
The next one, number I think 6, I don't know, 5 or 6, somewhere in there, is the Radio Free Leader. Brian, tell us about this.
So this one was mine. I don't think Dylan's heard of this one, but
I have not.
It's still on Apple Podcasts, but they stopped recording episodes at the end of 2017. So it's ancient in podcast world. But I found it about a year ago or so, and I don't remember how I stumbled across it, but I just started listening to it, and I started listening to it before I realized it had been discontinued. And it's a guy named David Burkus, and he's just, it's not ministry related at all, but he just interviews founders of companies and leaders in different areas of the marketplace, but not really necessarily most people that I've heard of. So in other words, he's not interviewing the celebrity type entrepreneurs or the ones that everyone's heard of, that everyone's interviewing. It's more just like these regular people that have started big tech companies or things like that, but that no one's really heard of. And he dives into all areas of leadership. They talk a lot about leading millennials and what that looks like, because if I remember correctly, he is a millennial, but on like the really older end of it. And so they talk a lot about leading a younger generation and how kind of technology is changing things and how leadership is changing over the years. And so even though they're discontinued, they have, I think it's 700 and something episodes still available. So it's going to be a long time until you run out. That's awesome. I don't know if he's done anything since, but yeah, Radio Free Leader.
And then tell us about this next one here, Brian.
This next one, I never heard of this next one. So this next one, I have a reason to put it in here, and that's TED Talks. It's TED Talks podcast. It's the same as just watching them on YouTube.
This might be a dumb question, but they actually have like a podcast just for all their TED Talks?
They do, yep. Oh. And they actually have a bunch of different ones. You can do like TED Talks Education or TED Talks whatever, but I just subscribe to TED Talks. And so the reason I put it on there is we've talked about TED Talks in regards to public speaking before, how it's good to learn from, and that's true. But more of the reason I put it on there is I heard, and I should have verified this quote. I'm 99% sure it was Tim Keller that said this, but I said I think, so I'm not positive, but I think it was Tim Keller. Someone asked him what he likes to read, and he said, basically, he essentially said everything. He said, I don't just read theology, because you can't say you want to engage the culture and not consume anything that's going on in culture. So you can't say you want to engage culture and then only read theology, because that is not the same thing.
Right.
And so when I heard him say that, it kind of directed me towards TED Talks, because what they are is it's experts talking about anything, and it's always things that are going on in the world. And so there's tons of things on there, tons of talks given on things that I don't agree with or positions I don't agree with. But I think it's good to hear what the issues facing the world are and what issues people outside of the church are deeming as important,
right?
Which most likely are, may or may not be important, but people think are important, and the positions that are held. So I think it's good to see what other positions are held than what you hold,
right?
If that makes sense.
I didn't know they could do TED Talks in specific categories. I might have to subscribe after this episode, Brian.
They do, yeah. If you search TED Talks, there's like a bunch of different podcasts you can subscribe to, and they just kind of filter them into different categories.
Cool.
Yep.
Number 8 on the list, second to last, is something called Unseminary. Wow, I'm blanking on his name.
Rich Birch.
Rich Birch, that's right. His has changed over the years. Sometimes it's weekly, sometimes it's not. I don't really know.
Yeah.
But a lot of times he has ministry leaders on there talking about growth or volunteers or executive pastor or preaching. Again, it's all ministry specific. Typically has some practical aspects to it. And I think his website, Rich Birch, he writes blog forms off the episodes. So there's been a couple of times where he had an interview with somebody and they said something and I couldn't remember, and I went back and found the blog and I search the blog, Command F or whatever it is, or you could type in a word or two, and I've actually found it. And so the Unseminary podcast, their tagline is things that you wish that you had learned in seminary. Yeah. And so again, it's ministry focused, but again, it's a lot of stuff on Connect cards, volunteers, whatever you might have questions on. That's a good resource.
Yeah, it's similar to Carey Nieuwhof's, but more ministry focused than his, and I think shorter form if I remember right.
Yeah.
But they've been on each other's podcasts. I think they're both great to listen to.
Yeah. Yeah. His is interview based for the most part, although his has changed throughout the years, but a little bit shorter, but just ministry focused, and it's really helpful.
Yep.
And so those are 8 podcasts to listen to, plus the 2 bonus ones. Well, the one you're already listening to, plus I guess Brian says mine. The last one is not necessarily a podcast. So here's number 9, but just maybe an encouragement if you are a preacher to listen to podcasts of other pastors, and not just for their content of because I know sometimes you're maybe you're preaching on a topic and so you try to listen to what a pastor says about this, and that's fine. But I'm listening to their delivery, listening to how they communicate, listening to their style, how they tell stories, their structure, their flow, listening for that purpose. I mean, you can learn stuff from it, but I have found being intentional every once in a while of listening to different pastors, on podcasts, their church's thing. Yeah. And the ones that you that you look up to, that are good communicators, just learning how they communicate goes a long way in helping you, try things in your own communication. Yeah. I mean, this one comes down to honing your craft. And if your craft is preaching, then I think you owe your congregation to be improving. And one of the ways to improve is to listen to people that are better than you. That's right. Yeah. So again, thanks for listening to the podcast today. If you go to practicalplanting.com, you can get the show notes for this. I do not know what episode number this is going to be. It's going to be 107, 108, 109, something like that. I think. Like that. If you go practicalplanting.com/episode 107 or 108 or whatever it is, or just go to practicalplanting.com and it'll be close to the top. Yeah, but it's in that area. Yeah. I don't know what number this is going to be. But if you want to, again, we'll link to all these in the show notes to this episode, so you don't have to like go back and listen to the whole thing. If you found ones that you're like, oh, that's interesting, I want to listen to it, that's where you go.
That's so nice of you.
That's all right. Well, nothing but the best for our awesome church planters.
Because you already subscribed to this one.
That's right. Yeah. So thanks for being with us today, and we'll be with you next time on Practical Church Planting. Thanks so much for watching this episode of Practical Church Planting. Whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube or Practical Planting, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, make sure you like or subscribe or do whatever it's telling you to do or should do on that platform.
And hey, if you are so tired of looking at our ugly faces, but you're not tired of listening to our beautiful voices, then you can find our podcast if you just search Practical Church Planting on iTunes or Google Play. Make sure not to just find it, not just to listen, but to subscribe.
Make sure you subscribe. Brian, tell them to subscribe.
Subscribe.
See you next time.